Okay, let's continue on to section 2, firewall objects, addresses, services, and groups. Address objects and groups. Okay, everyone, so we just began section 2. In section 2, we're going to be looking at objects inside our Palo Alto firewall. They're there to be utilized, and if you take a closer look at the picture that I'm showing, imagine yourselves getting a call at 2 a.m. in the morning. Oh, you gotta love those calls. And seeing that some of your junior engineers, they put a policy on your firewall, and you as a senior security engineer will need to wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning because your Asia customers or your Asia team is not able to access the SQL server. Or the SQL server is not able to talk to your web server, which is sitting on the DMC. You realize that your colleague put a policy day before and he did not document on his change request form what was the source IP nor what was the destination IP. You wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning after that nice phone call from the network operations center telling you that the SQL services for the web application are down. You log in onto the firewall and you take a look at that beautiful policy table, and you will look like the picture on your right. Yes, you're gonna be astonished because you will not know at 2 a.m. in the morning which one is the SQL server. Well, let me tell you, I've been there, and I want you to know that you need to use address objects and group them using object groups. The reason why, if you are going to be waking up at 2 a.m. in the morning to troubleshoot something as convoluted as that policy table, I don't think you're gonna have a very good day the next day. So this is what the section is for you to know how to take advantage of addresses and address group objects. So let's begin. Okay, 3 topics that we're gonna be discussing in this video. Number 1, creating address objects. We're gonna create a couple of address objects. We're gonna classify them properly. That IP will no longer be an unknown IP. We're gonna use that to provide an identity. We're going to be organizing also those address objects with address groups. So if you have multiple devices that are related to the same application, you might want to create an address group and add all those address objects so you know that they're belonging to that particular group. And finally, we're going to look at limiting the human error and complexity thanks to using those address groups in our policies. What I mean by that is, instead of you making a policy each time that you need to allow or restrict some traffic, you just need to add that particular IP into an object and add the object onto an existing rule that already has the group. So don't worry, we'll take a look at that and you're going to be understanding that in no time. Okay, the purpose of this video is for you to understand what are address objects and how can we take advantage of them on the Palo Alto firewall. This is the scenario that we're seeing right here. We have 3 servers on the inside. Those are the IPs of those servers on the inside. And we got 3 servers sitting on the DMC. Those will be our web front-end servers. We have a customer. This customer has an e-commerce website, and this website is sitting on those 3 servers that are listening for outside requests. Those 3 servers are actually reaching those 3 inside servers, which are the application servers. So the web server needs to communicate to the application server so the data can be transmitted back and forth to the customer. So you get that good old call at 2 a.m. in the morning and you got woken up because those web servers are down. The website is actually loading, but they cannot send and receive any application input. So the user is trying to input some data. The servers are giving out a 404 error, meaning that they cannot communicate to the inside. And you're like at 2 a.m. in the morning, you have no idea what or where or why those server IPs are there. You have no idea what's the purpose of them, and you also don't have any idea of what those IPs are that are configured on that rule as well. So this is where address objects are going to come into play. Those address objects are going to let you sleep a little bit more than 2 hours when you get that phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning. Let's begin the session by labeling each one. So we made some calls last night and we were able to identify what those IPs are. And sure enough, this will be the app1 server. This will be the app2 server. And finally, I may expand this a little bit. Okay. And we finally have the app3 server. So now we know that those are the application servers for our e-commerce website. Let's go ahead and move this a little bit. Okay, so we have app1, app2, and app3. Okay, now we have the 3 DMC web servers. We also know that each one is web 1, web 2, and web 3. Okay, I just labeled our application servers because we at first didn't know what those IPs were for, but now we know that those are the application servers and those are the web servers for our e-commerce website. Now we need to configure those address objects, and we're going to be allocating the IP address for each relevant object into the specific one. We're going to be allocating the individual IP on the application server address object. Same with the DMC. So let's continue with that. Okay, we are in the Palo Alto, and we're going to go ahead and click Objects. Now we're clicking Addresses. We're going to click Add. And let's go ahead and add that first server, app1. And let's get that IP address so we can add it here. Okay, so for app1, we have the 10.211.43.44. Let's go ahead and add that IP into the object. I'm going to copy this and let's paste it here. Okay, so when you're working with address objects, you have the flexibility of adding a whole subnet. So if you can see here, you can add the whole subnet inside our notation. So if this was a /24, you basically can create this whole subnet here. Or you can add the individual IP. In this case, we're adding the individual IP for app01. And you know what? We don't have just one application server. We're hosting multiple applications. So it will make sense to label this according to the type of application or the platform that this server is providing services for. In this case, we talked about that this is the e-commerce website. So we're going to call it e-commerce app01. When I press OK, awesome. So we have the first app01 server, and this is the e-commerce app01. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to be doing exactly the same thing for the other app02 and app3. Okay, so I just did the second object, and this is app2. I want to show you a cool feature that we can use in the Palo Alto GUI. We can create one object, and then we can clone that and just change what's different, and then keep creating more objects so we don't need to type constantly, right? So let's go ahead and click clone. And then it's telling me which object I want to clone from. In this case, I just selected 2, so we're going to press OK. And now we basically have a clone of the same one, which indeed has the same IP. But in this case, I'm going to change this to be the last IP. So let's go ahead, and this will be app3, and we're going to change this to 8. Press OK. Awesome. So now we have the app server objects created on the Palo Alto. And you can see everything is all neat with the application name and the app server number. We're going to go ahead and press commit because remember, nothing is effective until we press commit. Press commit and we should have those objects stored on the firewall. Okay, so commit completed. Now we need to do the same thing with the web DMC servers. Let's go ahead and create those objects real quick. I'm going to select the first one. Let's copy the IP. And let's go to the Palo Alto and create that object. Okay, let's go ahead and add the object. And again, now we know that this is e-commerce web 1. Go ahead, paste, and apply. And let me go ahead and do the other 2. Okay. Thanks to the magic of editing, I just created those 3 web server objects. I got the 254.44, 47, and 48, and those are the web servers that are sitting on the DMC. Remember what we have to do after we make a change? Commit. Okay, so commit has completed. Now that we have all those beautiful objects identifying every single IP, now we know what are they for. But wouldn't you like to, instead of having multiple policies, have one single policy that basically does the same thing? Isn't it easier to have a single policy that groups all those objects together, and you know that the policy for the e-commerce website is only one policy? So I think it's better to do it that way. That way it's easier to troubleshoot. don't you think? So let's go ahead and create an address group, and let's nest each individual object inside the group so we then have a more clean policy on our security tab. So let's go ahead and create an address group. Click on address group, and first we're going to create the first group. Is going to be our app servers group for e-commerce. So let's label that as e-commerce app servers. And then now we're going to add those objects that we previously created. Click on add. We got app 1, add again app 2, and add again app 3. Press OK. And now we got an address group with all our address objects inside that group. This is the relevant object group for the application servers. Let's do the same thing for the web servers. Add. We're going to call it the same way because we want to make sure that we have the same naming convention. We want to make sure that we follow a standard naming convention. So everyone agrees on the standard naming convention and no one needs to figure out any weird naming scheme that someone decided to put on an object. So let's go ahead and e-commerce again. This time it's web servers. Click on add, and we're going to select those 3 web servers that we created. And we can press OK. There you go. We got our address objects and we got our address group objects, and we're adding all relevant objects inside of that group. Do you want to see now how a policy will look like once we have this applied? Look at that. Do you notice a difference? I do notice a difference. It is clean, it is precise, and it's easy to troubleshoot. You now know that there's a single policy on your Palo Alto that provides traffic flow to the e-commerce app servers, to the e-commerce web servers. Same with policy that you want to create. So in this case, let's say we want to create a policy backwards. We're going to do a DMC to inside. Right now, the application servers are going to be able to talk to the web servers if the traffic is originating from the inside. We want to do the same thing for the DMC. Let's go ahead and create the same policy. How will that look like now that we have proper organized address objects? What a difference. What a difference. Can you see the difference? Imagine if you did not have address objects, or imagine if you do not apply address objects on your policies or address groups. Can you imagine the same rule duplicated backwards on the same policy table? Yeah, you're going to have a long night, trust me, if your firewall is looking like that. However, if you configure a firewall to look like this, you're going to have some spare time to sleep. I also want to show you why it's so important to create this type of policy where we integrate address groups and address objects. So let's say your application team told you that they expanded their application server pool, meaning that you now need to allow one extra server onto that address group in order for it to communicate to the DMC and sequentially, to the web servers. In normal scenarios where you're not applying address groups onto your firewall, you're going to have another policy just for that server. In this case, we don't need to touch the policies. We just need to add that extra address object that we're going to be creating for the new server and just add it inside the address group. Let's go ahead and do it. They provided us our application server IP, and we're going to create a new address object for that new server. Okay, we got e-commerce app 4, and they gave us .49 as the IP of the server. Okay, now the only thing that we need to do is add this object inside the address group object. Click on app servers object group, click add. Let's find the app e-commerce app 4, click OK. Let's click commit. We did not only created the object, we already allowed traffic to that new server. We did not even need to go into the policy to modify policies whatsoever. You saw how awesome it is to build objects and have them working in your favor, meaning that you don't need to deal with policies. You just need to add the object inside the address group, and automatically you're giving the rights that that server needs to have in order to communicate to the DMC. We haven't touched any policies. We just added the new application server inside the address group. That's it. The application is already there. Anything that is added onto that group, it's already applied to the policy. So you see, that's how you limit the human error and complexity by applying address groups to your policies. Now that's what I call a professionally looking policy on a firewall. You see the difference? Make sure you apply it, and trust me, you'll have more time to sleep at night. Okay everybody, we just finished our first video of section 2. In my next video, I will be discussing service, objects, and groups.